Today, so from now to the end of the book of Genesis, it will pretty much be all about Joseph, except for 2 chapters, and one of the chapters is today. So, and I put a little cautionary warning on it because it covers some, well, possibly offensive stuff. Did I ever tell you my theory about translating scripture for the kind of sensitive-eared grandmother? Because there's a number of places in the Old Testament that are translated a lot more genteel than what's actually in the Hebrew. So some of the stuff in the Hebrew will make you blush. So make a sailor blush maybe. So yeah. All right, so chapter 37. So Joseph is going to have a dream. Now that's not weird, right? Who had dreams? Let's see, didn't his dad have a dream going on the way going to live with Laban, where he found his 2 wives, even though he just wanted to marry one? And then on the way back, same sort of thing. And so now Joseph does. So let's see what the deal is with these. Okay? So chapter 37. Why did I put 50? Oh, I'm preaching on chapter 50. That's why. So today in the sermon, you'll hear a little bit of this because that's background information for what takes place in chapter 50. So if somebody's not fully aware of the Genesis text, it'll kind of help. Okay. So the first 4 verses. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. So these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock of his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report to them to their father. So what does that mean? They be bad boys. Right? Now Israel loved Joseph. Who's Israel? Jacob. Remember yeah. So, oh, okay. So here we go. Oh, you're getting 2, Betty, 1 for each eye.
Thank you.
All right. So let's see. We were verse 4, were we not? Or 3 or something. Okay. So, and Joseph brought a bad report to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than the other of his sons. What is that called? Favoritism or bias, or is that recommended when you're a parent? Why not? Yeah, it creates jealousy, family division, sometimes hatred, right? Because if this goes on your whole life, it has a chance just to build up and get expressed in some way eventually. Okay, so that right there gives us an undertone of kind of what's going on. Okay, so we know that Jacob loves Joseph more than his other sons because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. We know this story, right? I guess if we went to Sunday school for at least a year, everyone has to know this one. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Oh, bad tension in the house, right? Okay, so Joseph gives a bad report for 2 of his cousins. And then his brothers don't really like him because he's dad's favorite. So he doesn't really have any allies, does he? His dad, but other than that. So in a sense, Joseph is really experiencing stuff because of what his father does, right? If his father was more evenly handed or loved all of his children more closely than really loving one and all the others, then, it wouldn't be so messed up. Okay? So it's not good. Okay? Well, let's continue on. Let's see what happens. Okay. Verses 5 through 11, because the thing on top of 37, the little heading, at least in my Bible, says Joseph's dreams. So we're going to get to that now. 5 through 11. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." Yeah. Now, before each thing it says "behold" in Hebrew. That's kind of like hene. It's kind of like like check this out, or here I am, or this is important. It has a whole bunch of different. It's kind of it can act as an interjection. So, he's saying these things, and I think each "behold" is just making his brothers more angry. Okay. His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us, or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." I don't know if I would tell that dream. I mean, you have this dream and you're like, well, maybe I just won't tell them. I might get beat up. Right? But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but the father kept this saying in mind. So what did Jacob kind of do? He tried to moderate it. I think it was for the sake of family peace. But it says he kept it in mind. Now, why would Jacob keep it in mind? Did he not experience God coming to him in a dream? And both of them, ended up being true. So he's thinking, well, I better not throw stones at this, because maybe God is doing this with Jacob. So he's reserving judgment, though at first glance he's thinking, this seems kind of odd, because this is not kind of the normal order of things. And I would say that's true. That is not the normal order of things. Okay? So on the bottom of page 1, so in the dream, halom in Hebrew, well, we already know from Jacob, okay, but also elsewhere in the Old Testament, that God sometimes comes to people in their dreams. Okay? He may relay a message, either warning or instructions, and there's some passages that show that, revealed his glory and his blessings, and offered glimpses or a prophecy of what is to come. And that's in Numbers and in Deuteronomy. So they do have a purpose. What we don't want to do is think every dream we have is from God, because most dreams aren't. So God does do this, but it is something atypical. And he doesn't promise that he will do that. So the thing is we want to be open in case such a thing happens, but at the same time, we don't want to put God to the test. And things that we do know, we say, well, if we think this is from God, well, does it kind of comport itself with Scripture, at least what we know of it? And if it doesn't, then you go, well, wait a minute. If this came from God, then why is he telling me to kill my sister? Right? So it would be those sorts of things you'd have to say, hey, right? Okay. So Joseph found dreams influential. His nighttime visions foretold his future prominence within his family. So it does come true. He also deciphered the symbolic dreams of Pharaoh and his court officials. Joseph attributes his ability to interpret dreams to a divine gift from God. Okay? So food for thought. Okay? Because, Joseph, a dreamer of dreams, found himself at odds with his brothers. His dreams alone did not evoke their disdain. His words stoked the embers of hatred. So he had these dreams, right? But then what did he do? He shared them with several beholds, which, which adds more gravitas to it. Or like, hey, check this out. Check this out. Check this out. And it's like, you little punk, I'll show you. Right? So, yeah. So he shared his dreams to voice them aloud rather than keep them locked up within the confines of his mind. The nature of his dreams and the manner of his speech worked in harmony to intensify their hatred. So what he ended up doing is he ended up throwing fuel on the burning embers within. Of course, when you throw fuel on burning embers, what happens? Right? So they're going to lash out in some way. Okay? Now, usually if this happens, well, you would just get beat up or something. But this is the Old Testament. And sometimes the families aren't as nice as we expect. Okay? So let's continue on and let's see what happens, because this is telling us all the stuff that's going on. And it makes you wonder if Joseph is not aware of these dynamics. But it makes me think later on he has to be aware of interpersonal dynamics to be as successful as he will become. So maybe this is just youth, or we don't know the entire thing. But anyways, his brothers are none too pleased. Verses 12 through 24. I have to keep moving back because of feedback. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem, and Israel, that is, Jacob, said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to them, "Here I am." So that's the same thing as behold, here I am. Okay. So he said to them, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron and came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock?" And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" That's not in Georgia, by the way, guys. So, never mind. Or Alabama. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Not just beat him up. Wow. Okay. They said to one another, "Here comes the dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." And that could happen, right? I mean, why are shepherds out there watching the sheep? To protect them from harmful animals. So, yeah, this could happen. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore. And they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, and there was no water in it. So, like, what? If he can't figure a way out, what's going to happen? Yeah. Thirst is a horrible way to go. Wow. So, okay. Not good. And this little blurb in the middle, basically, a lot of this is in response to how Joseph favored Jacob growing up. Oh, Jacob favored Joseph growing up. Okay. We don't know how much, but it must be quite a bit for the other brothers to say, let's kill him. I mean, they're really mad. And it's been stewing for a long time. Now, Reuben says, no, let's not go that far. Let's not murder him. So he's trying to moderate, right? And so, at least, right, that's better than murder. But still not the best. Okay? So let's continue on and see what happens. Okay? So we'll go, but then the story will stop, and there's going to be this weird chapter, and then it'll continue next week. Okay? So 25 through 28. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. Now that I can see we can make some profit. Right? So in other words, this is win-win. We don't have to kill him, but we can get rid of him. Now, so they're going to get some money from this. I don't know how. Are they going to split it or hide it from Dad, or who knows? Right? Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. So traders actually, right? Traders then sold him to someone else, and there it is. So now he's an official slave, bought and paid for, right? So it wouldn't make good sense to try to escape, but yeah. So that's all we know for now. So now we're taking kind of an excursion into another chapter. This does fit a little bit into the overall narrative, but not specifically into the story of Joseph. So that'll happen at chapter 39. So next week, we'll have to just come back with bated breath, because he's a slave. And then I think we know what happens, don't we? Well, if not, listen to the sermon. You'll find out in the sermon. Yeah, I would hope so. Okay. So, chapter 38. Mm-hmm.
What would a pit be?
Oh, it's, it could be, yeah, it could be a place where maybe somebody was thinking of digging a well, and
Cistern.
Yeah, it could be a cistern. Now, a cistern would be really a hole that would be designed to collect water when it rains. And that makes more sense, even though the word is not that specific.
Is this such a dry climate?
Yes. Yeah, so that way when it rains, you want a place to catch the water. And then there you have it for future times when it's not. So it's not a desert, but it is arid. Okay? So it makes sense to kind of do that. Okay, chapter 38. Sensitive ears, you might want to get up and leave now. But this is in Scripture. Okay. So I have content warning. Okay? So chapter 38 can be confusing because so much takes place. We'll try to sort it out so we know who is doing what to whom. So we'll read through the first 5 verses, and then we'll say son 1, son 2, and son 3, etc. Okay? It happened at the time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He took her and went into her, and she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Now, does this sound like this is what should be going on? Doesn't sound like it should. Because who are these people, right? I mean, they're certainly not followers of Yahweh. Okay. But, okay, um, so now okay. She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Isn't there like a generator something company like that called, yeah. So, not Conan the Barbarian, but Onan the generator. Okay. Yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. Judah was in Kazib when she bore him. So how many sons are there? Okay. Let's see. And she gives you Onan, and then number 3, Shelah. Okay? So 3. Okay. Onan, and Shelah. Okay. Because, interactions will happen. So let's continue. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. Okay, so now so this is covering a lot of time, isn't it? It's just, yeah. So this is really just kind of giving a historical bit of information and background now. Okay? But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Okay, we don't know what the deal is. Okay, but all of this is to tell us something. Okay? Then Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he went into his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground, so as not to give offspring to his brother. And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my son, grows up," for he feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. So Shelah's like, okay, I'm going to follow the rules. Okay, so what's going on here? Even though technically it hasn't yet officially been given, right? So one brother dies, and what's the other brother supposed to do? Yeah, okay. There's several purposes for this, right? One is to continue the family line of the deceased brother. This includes property rights. Now, what happens is that he dies, and so now she remains part of the father's household. See, so really all of this is like the Social Security of the day. It's to ensure what? Well, that it continues, but that women aren't homeless. Because the guys are the ones who work in the field, that do the work, that earn the money. I mean, they do the income earning jobs back then, or the the stuff, the hard labor jobs of growing food, etc., etc. So that's kind of the purpose of this. So when we hear, we kind of get creeped out a little bit, like, oh man, that just sounds weird. But I mean, it does have a purpose, right? But Onan, I think it's worth exploring what Onan did and why, because I think sometimes when it is mentioned, it's mentioned for the wrong reason, not for the real reason. Okay? So what does it say in the text when he said, "Well, I'm not going to give her a child"? Why? It would be his brother's. Well, it would biologically be his. So when he said it would be his brother's, what does that mean? Yes, everything that his, right? And the first son gets the largest portion of the inheritance, right? So normally it would be 50%, and then the rest are split evenly among the other sons. So he's saying, well, I'm not going to do that. So that way I'll get the big chunk. Right? So, yeah. So that's the reason. Okay? But, so what Onan will be used for, sometimes it'll be used, we'll see, this shows that God doesn't like contraception. Okay, well, that actually has nothing to do with it here. It's not because he was doing a form of contraception. It was because he wanted to make sure that Tamar did not produce an heir for Okay? Sometimes people say, oh, well, this shows that masturbation is bad. Okay, I'm not promoting that, but that has nothing to do with this. All of this has to do with what he's doing, is he's trying to prevent he's trying to hoard everything to himself. This is greed. So he doesn't mind having sex with his brother's wife, but he doesn't want her to be pregnant. Okay? So that's kind of when we see all this stuff. Deuteronomy 25, this is kind of like the Levirate laws and stuff, and it basically just kind of tells you how all of this works, even though that information has yet to be given. So what this tells us is that the people of God know and are following these things. So how do they know this was passed down orally? It just hasn't been written down. And then later on in Deuteronomy, it gets codified. Okay? We'll just read it. If brothers dwell together and one dies and has no son, the dead man's wife shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. And suppose the man does wish to take suppose the man does not wish to take his brother's wife. In that case, his brother's wife shall go up to the gate to the elders and say, where did this happen? Because it extends farther, to more distant relations. That's the story of Ruth. There was somebody else who was closer, whose obligation and responsibility was to take Ruth into his household. But that can be expensive, right? And so he didn't want to do it. But Boaz said, I will do it. And Boaz wanted to, right? So in that case, his brother's wife shall go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him, and if he persists, saying, I do not wish to take her, then his brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders and pull his sandal off his feet and spit in his face. In other words, loser. Okay? And she shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. That's what this is all about. Right? Continuation of that line, as well as property rights and everything else associated with it. So it also prevents what? Well, I'll just kill off everybody and inherit it all, right? So it also kind of helps stop that greediness from happening, though it did stop Onan. Okay? And the name of the house shall be called Israel, the house of him who had pulled his sandal off. So that kind of just shows how that functions, right? And so we kind of see that there was a sandal also involved with Ruth and Boaz and all of that. So, and that's a long time after, and that practice is still taking place. Okay. So, anyways, I think the questions down below we kind of covered. Here's what Luther says on this. So, under the law of the Old Testament, if a man dies childless, his brother was responsible for giving his widow a child. This law was in place because children were considered a great blessing, but it's also to ensure property rights. Also, a childless woman was considered cursed, if only because someone may not be there to care for her in old age. Okay? Onan's brother had died and left his widow without a child. So it was Onan's duty to sleep with his brother's widow to produce a child for. It was his duty. I know that sounds creepy to us, but it was his duty. Okay? Onan was willing to indulge in sexual gratification, but unwilling to assume his responsibility. Of what? Fathering an heir for his brother. Okay? So these are Luther's words. He gets kind of long-winded sometimes, but it's pretty good. This is a most disgraceful sin. It is far more atrocious than incense and adultery. We call it unchastity, yes, a sodomitic sin. Okay. Like Sodom? So, for Onan goes into her, he lies with her and copulates, and at the point of insemination spills the semen lest the woman conceive. Surely at such a time the order of nature established by God in procreation should be followed. It was a most disgraceful crime to produce semen and excite the woman and to frustrate her at that very moment. So you can kind of see Luther's thinking on a number of different issues all kind of coming together here. Okay? So this is all about greed, and he's deliberately not following the law. Okay? Are we ready to continue? So, 12 through 19. I guess it wasn't that bad. Probably because we see stuff much worse on television now. Even if you don't want to. You're just changing channels. Right? So, okay. 12 through 19. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. When Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep herders, and I have to take my glasses off. Okay? He and his friend Hira the Adulamite. And when Tamar was told, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear sheep, she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil. So it's not like, all the weirdness is done. Okay? Wrapping herself up and sat at the entrance to Anaim, which is on the ground of Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. So now more years have passed, right? And the brother that she's supposed to marry was not given to her in marriage. So we don't know what's going on. Whether he's like, well, I don't want to do that. She's kind of old. But whatever, that hasn't happened, right? And so, okay. Well, she would like an heir to take care of her when she's old. She would like not to be landless, right? So she would like an heir. Okay. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute. Now, who's Judah? Her father-in-law. Okay. For she had covered her face. He turned to her at the roadside and said, come, let me come into you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, what will you give me that you may come into me? He answered, I will send you a young goat from the flock. So that seems like he's paying her a lot of wages in that time, I would think, because of goats. I don't know. How long would it take to earn that equivalent? It'd be a lot, I would think. And she said, if you give me a pledge until you send it. He said, what pledge shall I give you? She replied, your signet and your cord and your staff that is in your hand. So she's asking for personal stuff, right? And that she will keep it. So she's kind of like a pawn shop. She's going to keep it until he makes payment. Well, that's not unreasonable. It's kind of weird that they're doing it, right? But as a business transaction, that's not weird. Okay? So he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose and went away, and taking off her veil, she put on the garments of her widowhood. What just happened? And who's messed up in all this mess? They both are. The old dude's seeing prostitutes, and his daughter-in-law's pretending to be one because she wants an heir, right? Will that actually be legally considered Er's son? I don't know. But if she gets away with it, I don't think there's going to be much argument, right? Because, how embarrassed would Judah be, the old man, or the older man? It'd be pretty embarrassing. You slept with your daughter-in-law? And you thought she was a prostitute? What? You can say what you want about her, but you have to say just as much about him. I mean, wow. Whew. Crazy town. See? Yeah. That's why we all have to know this stuff. So that, not so that we can use this as an excuse, but we just know that there's hope for us. Because, wow, man. Okay. Let's press on. This is not good. I mean, this would be, remember back in the day, was it Jerry Springer? All he had was like dysfunctional families and people who would fight and argue. So this would be something like the Jerry Springer show or whatever. Like, who's the dad? Or something like that. Well, this was a number of years ago. I think he has since died or whatever. Yeah. Okay. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite to take back the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. Well, at least he's trying to honor payment. I mean, that's a good credit to him, right? Oh, boy. Okay. And he asked the men of the place, where is the cult prostitute? So what does cult prostitute mean? He thought that she was a prostitute, but kind of a religious prostitute of some type. Okay, which was not a weird practice in some of the other local religions. Okay? So if you I mean, it's bad enough that you're sleeping with a prostitute, but if you're sleeping with a prostitute where it's a religious act for the woman, you're willingly participating in some weird form of idolatry. Man, come on, guy. Wow. Okay. Is the cult prostitute who was anigh him at the roadside? And they said, no cult prostitute has been here. So he returned to Judah and said, I have not found her. Also the men of the place said, no cult prostitute has been here. And Judah replied, let her keep the things as her own, and we shall be laughed at, or we shall be laughed at. You see, I sent this young goat, and you did not find her. So the goat's worth more than whatever, right? But the thing is, these are personal effects. And if we go trying to retrieve these personal effects, it is kind of funny, right? In the sense that, what? And then you lost your stuff? Yeah. So he said, there's no need for that. I'll just take the hit, right? Instead of having others laugh at me. And he probably doesn't want a whole bunch of other people to know, what he's doing. Not everybody. Okay. So now, why do you think this is going? Why do you think the one he thought was a cult prostitute, his daughter-in-law, just disappeared? Why do you think? What was her aims? She wanted an heir. And according to what was said earlier, she is pregnant. Okay? So that was achievable. But if it's by him and she's pregnant and she's part of the household, what do you think Judah's going to do when she starts to show? What are you sleeping around? What's wrong with you? Right? Okay. Little does he know. Verses 24 through 26. Okay. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality. And Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. Oh, dude, man. He's not a very compassionate man, is he? And she was being brought out. She sent word to her father-in-law, by the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. And she said, please identify whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff. Okay. Oh, boy. Then Judah identified them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah, and he did not know her again." Meaning, that was the one and only time he slept with her. So he recognized that he didn't do what he was supposed to do. And so he realizes, not that she had to do that, but she set up the situation where it could more easily happen, right? I mean, there still is personal culpability, but just like Joseph and his brothers, right? They have to be held accountable for what they did, and yet, who kind of set up the atmosphere where it was a lot more likely something like that could happen? Dad, right? So, yeah. So here, this is, we can kind of see, so part of the subtext is, are we living our lives in such a way where we could be encouraging or promoting the wrong thing? See? And so that's what we see in both cases. Okay? So let's press on. 27 through 30. Isn't this insane? I mean, wow. When the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out. This kind of sounds like Jacob and Esau, doesn't it? Right? I mean, so Jacob kind of means heel holder. So it's like grandpa. And she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself. Therefore his name is called Perez." Afterward, his brother came out with a scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. So you have twins just like a grandpa was a twin. And it was also kind of a weird situation. So, kind of, it always makes you think, so what's the role of, nature and nurture and all that sort of thing? Because I think there is a genetic link to twins. Is there not? I mean, because twins have a tendency to run in families. So.
Yeah, but the way this birth happened doesn't seem reasonable to me. I mean, I was born along with children. They don't come out and then go back and back.
Well, just the hand. Hey. I think you would have to talk to a well-seasoned midwife, and you might hear some tales that you might think were impossible. So, okay. So Tamar gave birth to twins Perez and Zerah. So Matthew 1 through 3. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Okay. And Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ram. This is the physical human ancestry of Jesus going down to Mary. So, and genealogies usually only list men, but Tamar's listed, right? And Tamar, wow, of course, Judah was a pretty bad dude too. I'm glad she had the insurance. So so the question that I wrote is, how important is Tamar and her son Perez? Well, important because they're part of the human ancestry from whom Mary will come. Okay? With Judah and Tamar in Jesus' genealogy, we find a woman committing adultery and a patriarch seeking sex with a prostitute. A cult prostitute. Not just a prostitute, right? I mean, let's throw religion into this as well. What does this say about those whom Jesus came to save? Chief of sinners though I be. Don't we sing that? Of course, that comes from Paul, but that's true. If you were to pick a family line, These are skeletons, but they're not even hidden in the closet. Right? And the fact that Matthew includes, so when you're reading this, as a first century Jewish person, you're reading this, you're like, it would be a little jarring because usually it's only all the patriarchs. Because, that's what's followed. And yet, here, Tamar's in there. And if you're Jewish, you know who Tamar is. You know what she did. Well, also what Judah did. And you go, part of the ancestry, the human ancestry of the Messiah. Yep. So his ancestry shows the people he came to save. So what we don't want to do is we look at chapter 1 in Matthew, we're like, so-and-so, father, who are these people? I don't know. Next. Oh, chapter 2. Yay, birth of Jesus. But all of this, the genealogy, not only shows who Jesus is, but why we need Jesus. Well, that's it. A little earlier than I thought, but I don't know if it was fun. But yeah, it's...
We don't, I have lived with my grandparents and great-grandparents, and I don't know anybody who wrote down a family tree and tracked all of it. It's like they write it in a family Bible or something.
Yeah.
But it isn't like cast in concrete like this is.
Yeah.
And yet I lived in I
Mhm.
used to live in New York, only Gentile in a completely Jewish family, or neighborhood, and yet those people were keeping a family tree
Mhm.
for generations.
Yeah.
There seems to be a mode of remembering or something.
Yeah, there's I mean, if you're Jewish and you still kind of maintain Jewish traditions, because a lot of that has been lost.
I thought,
Then,
they said they're still
yeah.
looking for the real Messiah. And
If you're a believing Jewish person, that is true. You're still waiting for the...
right, and
Yeah.
Jesus was not the right.
So in some segments of Judaism, like a few years ago, there was like this red heifer that was born, and that was supposed to be a sign that the Messiah. And so they're, red heifer, but it had to be 100% red.
I think that's a Hasidic
So,
there.
so Jews are, even though to a large degree, so they were, a lot of the messianic fervor really got knocked out of them because, they were almost exterminated 2 times because of that in the 2nd century. So, end of the 1st and near middle of the 2nd century. So, yep. Well, that's it. We'll continue with the story of Joseph. So, at least we understand Levirate law now. And we know that that's something serious. So, it is interesting to know that is mentioned, or at least the law itself is not mentioned, but the practice of it is mentioned even before the giving of it was. And so this lets us know that many of the things that end up being codified, right, they knew and were living. So some of it was to say, well, this is so that people don't forget. Because if they're doing that, then what else are they doing? And what else is being passed on? Okay? Let's close with prayer, shall we? Our Father, it is crazy. I mean, these people in the Old Testament and how messed up they are, but it's just like us today. It may not be the same specific things, but every family is messed up in some way. And I didn't know this till I became a pastor. And yet, you know this. And we are not to hide it from you, but know that is why you sent your Son, to cleanse us from even all those things we want to hide from ourselves and others, because Christ took them upon himself, washed us, and made us clean. Thank you for such mercy. Thank you for such grace. And let this just seep into our bones so that we know this and live it all our days. In our Savior's name we pray. Amen.